The clinking of ice in expensive glasses, the low hum of self-congratulatory conversation. Richard's parties were always the same, polished surfaces reflecting polished people. I used to try, in the beginning. I'd find a new dress, practice polite smiles, attempt to engage with the wives who, like me, often orbited their husbands' brilliance like pale, silent moons. But over the years, the effort felt increasingly futile. Tonight was no different. Richard, my husband of 25 years, was holding court, his voice booming slightly over the others, recounting some recent triumph in the financial world. I stood near the edge of the circle, nursing a glass of sparkling water, feeling the familiar cloak of invisibility settle around my shoulders. It wasn't an unpleasant feeling anymore, more like a worn, comfortable blanket. Too comfortable, perhaps. Mark, one of Richard's oldest friends and biggest rivals, clapped him on the back. "Richard, you old dog, always closing the big ones. How do you manage it all? And Eleanor?" he said, turning to me with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Always the picture of calm support. I offered a small, practiced smile. Before I could murmur a polite response, Richard laughed. It wasn't his warm laugh, the one I rarely heard anymore. This was his public laugh, sharp, dismissive. "Eleanor? Oh, she's mastered the art of being the perfect housewife," he announced to the group, gesturing vaguely in my direction. "Supportive, yes, but mostly, she just doesn't get in the way, doesn't distract from the important things." The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Doesn't get in the way. A distraction. He hadn't even looked at me when he said it. I was a piece of furniture, a background element mentioned in passing. The polite smiles on the faces around me tightened, a flicker of pity, perhaps embarrassment, in some eyes before they quickly looked away. Mark chuckled awkwardly. Richard, oblivious or uncaring, launched into another anecdote. My face felt hot, then cold. The sparkling water tasted like ash. 25 years of managing a household, raising 2 children who were now successful adults, juggling finances when his ventures were lean, hosting countless dinners like this one, smoothing over his social blunders, all reduced to not getting in the way. A non-entity, a distraction avoided. Something brittle inside me, something I hadn't even realized was holding me together, didn't just crack, it shattered. Quietly, without a word, I placed my untouched glass on a nearby table. No one noticed. Why would they? The distraction was removing itself. I slipped through the clusters of laughing guests, retrieved my coat from the closet, and walked out the front door into the cool night air. The click of the heavy oak door closing behind me sounded unnervingly final. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that I could never walk back through that door as the same woman. The invisible wife had just been seen, truly seen in her husband's careless dismissal, and the sight was unbearable. What then was left to become? The drive home was a blur. I don't remember the route I took, only the rhythmic sweep of the wipers against a light drizzle that had started, mimicking the repetitive loop of Richard's words in my head. Doesn't get in the way. A distraction. Each repetition chipped away another piece of the carefully constructed facade of our life together. By the time I pulled into our driveway, the house felt alien, cavernous. It was a beautiful prison I had decorated myself. Richard arrived hours later, smelling faintly of expensive cigars and oblivious triumph. He found me sitting in the dark living room, the silence thick around me. "You left early," he commented, loosening his tie, his tone holding mild surprise, not concern. "Feeling all right?" "Why did you say that, Richard?" My voice was low, devoid of its usual warmth. He paused, genuinely confused. "Say what?" "That I don't get in the way, that I'm not a distraction." He finally seemed to register the tension. He sighed, the sound laced with impatience. "Oh, Eleanor, don't be so sensitive. It was just locker room talk, a bit of banter among friends. You know Mark likes to needle me. I was just saying you let me focus on my work." It was meant as a compliment, really. A compliment. He thought diminishing my entire existence to the role of non-interference was a compliment. The chasm between his perception and my reality yawned before me, vast and terrifying. There was no malice in his eyes, only a profound, unbridgeable lack of understanding. I was simply not on his radar as a person with her own thoughts, feelings, or worth beyond her utility to him. It didn't feel like a compliment, Richard, I said quietly. It felt like I was nothing. He waved a dismissive hand. You're tired? Let's not make a mountain out of a molehill. It meant nothing. But it meant everything. It was the culmination of years of subtle dismissals, overlooked contributions, and the slow erosion of my own identity. His casual cruelty had inadvertently handed me a mirror, and I didn't recognize the faded reflection staring back. That night, sleep wouldn't come. I wandered into the spare room, now mostly used for storage. Boxes filled with remnants of my past life. College textbooks, half-finished manuscripts from a writing course I'd loved, notes from a research project I'd abandoned when our first child was born. My fingers traced the faded title on a worn binder. The Unspoken Narrative, Valuing the Invisible Work. It was a research proposal, something I'd been passionate about decades ago, exploring the societal and economic impact of unpaid labor, domestic management, the emotional scaffolding women so often provide. I'd poured my heart into it before life, and Richard's career took precedence. Sitting on the dusty floor, surrounded by the ghosts of my forgotten ambitions, a tiny spark ignited in the cold emptiness Richard's words had left. It was faint, fragile, but it was there. What if? What if the distraction decided to speak? What if the invisible work deserved its own narrative? The idea was terrifying, audacious, and utterly compelling. Could I even remember how? The days following the party settled into a new, strained rhythm. Richard acted as if nothing had happened, perhaps genuinely believing his dismissal had been forgotten or forgiven. I played along, the dutiful wife, but beneath the surface, something had irrevocably shifted. The silence in the house was no longer empty. It was charged with a secret energy. The spare room became my sanctuary, my laboratory. I started small, tentatively pulling out the old binder. The academic language felt foreign at first, the concepts dusty. But as I reread my own words, the passion that had driven me years ago flickered back to life. The world had changed since I'd last worked on this, but the core issues felt more relevant than ever. The internet, something nascent back then, offered a universe of information. I spent hours online, hidden behind the screen of my old laptop, devouring research papers, articles, and statistics. I learned about the mental load, the second shift, the ongoing struggle for recognition of women's contributions in both the home and the workplace. My research became an obsession, conducted in stolen moments, early mornings before Richard woke, late nights after he slept, afternoons when he assumed I was at book club or running errands. I converted a corner of the spare room into a makeshift office, hiding my notes and books whenever I heard his car in the driveway. It felt clandestine, almost illicit, this reclaiming of my intellectual self. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was literally not getting in the way while building something entirely for myself. There were moments of crippling self-doubt. Who was I, a middle-aged housewife decades removed from academia, to tackle such a complex subject? What could I possibly add? Richard's voice echoed in my mind, a distraction. But then I'd read another article, another statistic that resonated with my own lived experience, and the quiet anger would return, fueling my determination. This wasn't just academic, it was personal. It was the story of my life and the lives of countless women I knew. One rainy Tuesday, while searching for recent studies, I stumbled upon a call for papers for a small, online symposium focused on modern social dynamics. The deadline was only weeks away. On impulse, fueled by a surge of defiant energy, I decided to adapt my old research proposal into a short presentation abstract. I worked feverishly, updating my premise with contemporary data and insights. My fingers flew across the keyboard, words pouring out that I didn't know I still possessed. I wrote about the economic invisibility of care work, the psychological toll of being perpetually undervalued, the quiet power structures that thrive on this lack of recognition. Hitting submit felt like jumping off a cliff. I expected nothing. Rejection seemed inevitable, but 2 weeks later, an email arrived. Dear Eleanor Vance, it began, we are pleased to inform you that your abstract, The Currency of Invisibility, has been accepted for presentation. I read it 3 times, my heart pounding. Accepted. Someone wanted to hear what I had to say. It was a small symposium, online only, but it felt monumental. It was the first brick laid in the foundation of something new, something entirely mine. Could this small validation be the start of actually building something visible? Preparing for the online symposium consumed me. It wasn't just about the content, it was about finding my voice again, literally. I practiced my presentation aloud in the empty house, my voice shaky at first, unused to holding authority. I recorded myself, cringing at the sound, then forcing myself to listen, to improve my pacing, my tone. Richard noticed my preoccupation, my frequent retreats to the spare room. Spending a lot of time with your hobbies lately, he commented one evening, a hint of suspicion in his voice. Everything all right? Just catching up on some reading, I deflected, the lie tasting bitter but necessary. His definition of hobby felt like another subtle minimization. He couldn't conceive of me engaging in anything serious. The symposium itself was nerve-wracking. Seeing the faces of other presenters and attendees in little boxes on my screen felt strangely intimate yet distant. When my turn came, my hands trembled as I shared my screen. But as I started speaking, weaving together the research, the statistics, and the subtle, personal undertones drawn from my own life, a strange calm descended. The words flowed. I spoke of the women who manage households like intricate businesses, the mothers who provide unpaid therapy and logistical support, the wives who are expected to be silent partners in their husband's success, the invisible infrastructure holding up so much of the visible world. The cue. A session afterwards was surprisingly lively. People asked insightful questions. A professor from a small university complimented my framework. Someone else shared a personal anecdote that mirrored my points. For the first time in years, I felt truly heard, seen not as Richard's wife, but as Eleanor Vance, a researcher with something valuable to contribute. The validation was intoxicating, a quiet hum of energy that stayed with me for days. This small success emboldened me. I started writing again, not just academic abstracts, but more personal essays, reflections on the themes I was researching. I submitted a piece to an online journal focused on women's experiences. It was rejected. Then another. Rejected. Doubt crept back in. Maybe Richard was right. Maybe I was just distracting myself with a futile pursuit. But the fire, once lit, refused to be extinguished entirely. I kept researching, kept refining my arguments. I joined online forums, connecting with other women, academics, and writers interested in similar topics. I discovered a network of quiet support, women lifting each other up, sharing resources and encouragement. It was a world away from the competitive, dismissive environment of Richard's social circle. Then one ordinary afternoon, an email landed in my inbox with a subject line that made my breath catch. Invitation to speak, TEDx, local voices. I clicked it open, my heart hammering against my ribs. It was a formal invitation from the organizing committee of a regional TEDx event. Someone from the online symposium, the professor who had complimented my framework, had recommended me. They were intrigued by my topic, the currency of invisibility, and invited me to audition to develop it into a full TEDx talk. A TEDx talk. A real stage, a live audience, the potential for my ideas to reach thousands, maybe millions. It was terrifying. It was exhilarating. It was everything I hadn't dared to dream of. Could I actually do this? Could the invisible wife step into that iconic red circle? The TEDx invitation wasn't just an opportunity, it was a reckoning. Accepting meant stepping out of the shadows completely. It meant telling Richard. The thought filled me with a paralyzing mix of defiance and dread. For weeks, I kept it secret, throwing myself into preparing the audition materials, crafting the narrative arc of my talk, honing my central message. The theme, the currency of invisibility, felt deeply personal now, forged in the fire of Richard's dismissal and tempered by my rediscovery of self. I practiced relentlessly, turning the spare room into my rehearsal space. I imagined the audience, the lights, the weight of expectation. I worked with an online speaking coach recommended through my new network, someone who helped me shape my story, refine my delivery, and manage my nerves. She saw the potential, the quiet power in my message, and her belief was infectious. The audition, conducted via video call, was intense but successful. They loved the concept, the blend of research and personal resonance. I was officially offered a speaker slot. The date was set for 3 months away. There was no hiding it anymore. I chose a quiet Sunday evening to tell Richard. He was reading the financial news, a familiar scene. "Richard," I began, my voice steadier than I expected, "I need to tell you something." He lowered the paper, impatient. "What is it, Eleanor?" "I've been working on something, a project based on that old research I did years ago." He raised an eyebrow. "Oh, that academic stuff?" "Yes, it's about the value of work that often goes unrecognized, and I've been invited to give a TEDx talk about it." He stared at me, blankly at first, as if I'd spoken in a foreign language. "A TEDx talk? Like those things online?" "Yes, a live event in the city." Disbelief warred with something else on his face, confusion, perhaps a flicker of annoyance. "You, giving a talk? About housework?" He laughed, that same dismissive sound from the party. "Eleanor, that's quaint. But isn't that a bit out of your league? Those are for experts, important people." The familiar sting of his condescension threatened to derail me, but I held my ground. "It's about more than housework, Richard. It's about economics, sociology, and the narratives we value. And they seem to think I have something important to say." His amusement faded, replaced by a frown. "And when were you planning on doing all this? When did you find the time?" The implication was clear. Time stolen from her duties, her role. "I made the time," I said simply. The conversation deteriorated from there. He couldn't grasp it. He questioned my ability, the validity of the topic, the logistics. Underlying it all was a current of resentment, perhaps even jealousy, that I would dare to pursue something so public, so independent of him. "Don't you think you might be?" "Well, embarrassing yourself?" he asked, the words sharp. "Maybe stick to what you know." His lack of support, his immediate assumption of my failure, was the final confirmation I needed. This journey wasn't just about finding my voice, it was about freeing it from his judgment. "I'm doing it, Richard," I said, my voice firm. "Whether you understand it or not. Whether you support me or not." The battle lines were drawn. The preparation for the talk became intertwined with navigating the new, icy tension in our home. He oscillated between ignoring my efforts and making passive-aggressive remarks. The closer the date loomed, the more I felt utterly alone, facing the biggest stage of my life with my own husband predicting my fall. The day of the TEDx event arrived cloaked in a surreal calm. The frantic energy of the past few months coalesced into a strange, focused stillness within me. I woke early, the house silent. Richard was already gone, a curt note left on the kitchen counter. "Board meeting, might be late." No mention of my event, no good luck, no acknowledgement. It stung, but it also solidified my resolve. This day was mine alone. My daughter Sarah called, her voice warm with excitement. "Mom, break a leg. We're all cheering for you from here. We'll be watching the live stream." My son Michael sent a text filled with encouraging emojis. Their belief was a balm to the raw wound of Richard's indifference. Driving into the city, I felt a peculiar sense of detachment, as if watching myself from afar. The venue buzzed with energy, volunteers in matching t-shirts, technicians checking sound and light, other speakers pacing nervously, clutching notes. I found my assigned dressing room, a small, functional space with a mirror bordered by bright lights. Staring at my reflection, I saw the same face, the same lines etched by time and worry, but something in the eyes was different. A spark, a readiness. The hours before my slot passed in a blur of final run-throughs, makeup checks, and brief, encouraging interactions with fellow speakers. There was a physicist talking about dark matter, an artist exploring sustainable design, a young activist fighting for digital privacy. We were all there to share an idea, a passion. The diversity was exhilarating. No one asked who my husband was or what he did. They asked about my idea. My coach sent a final text. Breathe. Own your story. You've got this, Eleanor. As the speaker before me took the stage, a wave of nausea washed over me. The familiar whispers of self-doubt returned. Richard was right. This is absurd. Who am I to stand on that stage? I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and pictured the faces of the women in the online forums, the nods of understanding during the symposium, the memory of myself sitting on the dusty floor of the spare room, holding that old binder. I thought of Richard's dismissive words at the party. Doesn't get in the way. A distraction. A stage manager appeared at my door. Eleanor, 5 minutes. My heart hammered. This was it. I smoothed down my simple, elegant navy dress, chosen deliberately to convey quiet strength, not flash. I took another deep breath, centering myself. I wasn't doing this despite Richard. I was doing this because of who I had become in the process of overcoming his perception. I walked towards the backstage area, the muffled sound of applause for the previous speaker reaching my ears. The bright lights of the stage spilled into the wings, beckoning. This wasn't Richard's party. This wasn't his stage. This one was mine. I felt a hand on my arm, the stage manager giving me a reassuring nod. Ready? She whispered. I nodded, my throat tight, and took the first step towards the iconic red circle, the blinding lights hitting my face. Stepping into the center of the red circle felt like stepping into another dimension. The heat of the lights, the sea of expectant faces fading into the darkness beyond the first few rows, the profound silence before the first word is spoken, it was terrifying and electrifying all at once. My carefully rehearsed opening lines vanished from my mind. Panic flickered. Then I caught sight of the teleprompter, but more importantly, I remembered why I was there. I wasn't there to perform, I was there to share. I took a breath and began, not with the rehearsed opening, but with something simpler, more direct. We live in a world that measures value in dollars, in titles, in achievements that can be quantified. I started, my voice steadier than I expected. But what about the contributions that fall outside these metrics? What is the currency of the work that holds our lives together, yet remains largely invisible? I saw nods in the audience. I found my rhythm. I spoke about the concept of the mental load, the endless planning and organizing that disproportionately falls on women. I shared statistics about the economic value of unpaid care work. I wove in anecdotes, carefully anonymized, but drawn from the fabric of my own life and the lives of women I knew, illustrating the emotional labor, the constant juggling, the societal expectation to manage it all seamlessly, silently. And then I addressed the core of my argument, the theme born from that humiliating night. We talk about not wanting to be a distraction from the important work, I said, my voice gaining strength. But what if the distractions, the care, the support, the management of daily life are actually the foundational economy? What if the ability for some to focus solely on their careers is subsidized by the invisible currency spent by others, usually women? I didn't mention Richard by name. I didn't need to. The personal resonance was there, subtle but undeniable, fueling the passion in my delivery. I spoke of the danger of internalizing these dismissive narratives, of starting to believe you are merely background noise. I talked about the power of reclaiming your story, of assigning value to your own contributions, even when the world doesn't. The currency of invisibility, I concluded, my voice ringing with conviction, is paid by the unseen, the unheard, the underestimated. But recognizing its value is the first step towards a more equitable, and frankly, a more honest, accounting of how our world truly functions. It's time to make the invisible visible. Silence. A beat of stunned quiet hung in the air. Then, a single person began to clap. Another joined, then another, and suddenly the entire auditorium erupted in applause. People were getting to their feet. A standing ovation. Tears pricked my eyes, blurring the lights. It wasn't just applause for a good speech, it felt like recognition, like understanding, like a collective exhale from everyone who had ever felt unseen. As I walked off stage, my legs trembling, the stage manager gripped my arm, her eyes shining. That was incredible, Eleanor. Truly powerful. Back in the relative quiet of the wings, my phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. Mom, that was amazing. Crying. So proud. Then another from an unknown number. Eleanor. Watched online. We need to talk. Richard. My heart gave a jolt, not of fear this time, but of something else entirely. The power dynamic had just fundamentally, irrevocably shifted. The standing ovation echoed in my ears, a sound far louder than his dismissal had ever been. The aftermath of the TEDx talk was a whirlwind. The video went online a few weeks later and gained traction surprisingly quickly. Comments poured in, women sharing their own stories of feeling invisible, men acknowledging their own blind spots, academics praising the framework. Emails arrived from universities, women's organizations, even corporations interested in workshops on valuing internal support systems. My quaint little topic had struck a chord. Richard did want to talk. He was waiting when I got home that evening, the television off, the house quiet. He looked smaller somehow, stripped of his usual bluster. Eleanor, he began, his voice strained. I saw the talk. Online. I know, I said, meeting his gaze directly. There was no anger left, only a calm clarity. It was. Impressive, he admitted, the words sounding foreign on his tongue. I didn't realize. I mean, the way you put it all together. He trailed off, unable or unwilling to articulate the shift he must have felt. He saw the comments, the shares, the validation from strangers that he had never offered. You didn't realize because you never looked, I said, not unkindly, but stating a fact. You saw me as an accessory, Richard, convenient, supportive, but ultimately, a distraction from your world. He flinched. I never meant. Maybe not consciously, I interrupted gently. But it doesn't change the effect. For years, I tailored my life to fit the background of yours. I made myself small. You didn't ask me to, not in words, but the expectation was always there, and I accepted it, until that night at the party. We talked for hours, the most honest conversation we'd had in decades. He tried to apologize, to explain, but the chasm remained. His world was built on external validation, on deals and status. My world was now centered on internal worth, on giving voice to the undervalued. He saw my success now, but he saw it through the lens of public acclaim, not through genuine understanding of the journey or the message itself. In the end, there was no dramatic confrontation, no fiery revenge. The greatest revenge, I realized, wasn't about punishing him, it was about reclaiming myself. Staying together would have meant shrinking again, trying to reconcile two fundamentally different ways of seeing the world, of valuing a life. Quietly, calmly, we agreed to separate. It was amicable, tinged with sadness, but also with an undeniable sense of liberation for me. I moved into a smaller apartment in the city, closer to the university that had offered me a research fellowship. My life is simpler now, but infinitely richer. I write, I speak, I connect with people who share my passion. I am no longer orbiting anyone else's star. I am navigating by my own light. Sometimes I think back to that party, to Richard's careless words. They were meant to diminish, to dismiss. Instead, they became the unlikely catalyst for my own headline act. He called me a distraction, someone who didn't get in the way. He was right about one thing. I don't get in his way anymore. I'm too busy taking center stage in my own life. The invisible wife is gone, and the woman who stands here now is finally, fully visible.